So welcome everybody to the last session, the last time slot when we're all probably getting a little bit tired and ready to go home. So thanks for staying till the bitter end, and so we can talk a little bit about marketing campaigns at scale. So what we want to talk about today is how RightScale fits for those of you that might be doing marketing campaigns. And I'm using that very loosely to mean everything from, mobile and social and websites and apps that you might want to or be thinking about running in the cloud. So maybe just a quick poll, how many of you are already doing marketing of this sort in the cloud today? Okay, one person, two maybe. Others thinking about it. Okay, so let's just I'm going to talk about some case studies, some customers that we're working with that are doing these types of things to think about, and then how RightScale can help you if this is the thing that you're trying to accomplish. So the first thing is really a quote that came out recently, I think late last year out of Gartner. And I don't know if this was an official prediction, but one of their analysts essentially said that within 5 years, the CMO will spend more on technology than the CIO spends on technology, which sounds really shocking. But if you think about what marketing is doing today in interacting with customers, the mobile apps, the social apps, the gamification, the campaigns, the special websites, the normal websites, if you add that all up, there's technology underlying almost all of that. So you can imagine how that is going to get to be a pretty big number. And then the other thing, I was having a conversation last night at the cocktail party with somebody about the fact that marketing is almost by definition like rogue IT. So in marketing, we're used to having large budgets under our control that we typically spend often with outside contractors of some sort, our digital agency, our interactive agency, some type of contractor. And so the CMO is taking this money, and instead of asking IT to do something for them, which they know might take a really long time, they're like, I'll just go hire a contractor. I'll hire somebody to build my website. And so that's just the normal method of doing business for those of us in marketing. And that can have some positives, but because we gain that agility that we want and need as marketers to get to market quickly. That can have some downsides, especially in IT if you end up having to be responsible for then maintaining what somebody else built and make sure that it stays up and running over time. So let's talk a little bit about how IT, the CMO and the CIO can work together to deliver these demanding, ridiculous, crazy needs that marketers have while still allowing the IT group to sleep at night. So I think the first thing to know from a marketing point of view is the first thing we care about is we don't want to flop. We don't want a flop campaign, a flop website, social media. And so if you're talking to that CMO or those marketing people and you're focused on technology issues, really you need to tie it back to this. Really what they want in the end is a successful marketing initiative or campaign. And so anything you can do to tie what you need to do to success of the campaign, you're going to be speaking the same language. The second thing is that marketers do want success, so there's nothing better than the campaign or the activity that a gazillion people come to, and they tweet about you or they go to your Facebook app or they respond to your campaign. However, I heard somebody use this term, so I stole it yesterday, the success disaster. I think Richard Coffin from Samsung, meaning we succeed so well that we fail. So the technology breaks and this is the fail whale for Twitter. We've seen this happen to quite a few companies who've subsequently become our customer, often in emergency mode. Oh my God, we're having a problem. Our technology is down. We just spent millions of dollars on a media spend, an ad buy, a launch, a new product, whatever it is. Can you please help us? So let's try to prevent that in advance. But these are all things that your marketing friends will care about. And so if you can really tie this, I mean, how many people haven't heard about the Super Bowl ad with the tweet to the Facebook thing that draws everything to its knees, or the website that doesn't stay up and running because you had a success disaster? So tie it to that idea for your marketers. So cloud and RightScale are really a great fit for the needs of marketing. So let's talk about what your marketer wants and then how cloud along with RightScale can help. So first is scalable, because everybody wants to think they're going to have that huge successful campaign. At least they're trying to get there. And so they're going to want to know that if they have success, it's going to scale up. They're not going to have the fail whale and the disaster. Second thing, speed to market. Not an option. This is like critical because often marketing is driven by events, by launches, by holidays, things that are not allowed to slip. You don't get to move it. Once you made the Super Bowl ad buy, you're stuck with the Super Bowl ad buy. You can't change the date of the Super Bowl. You know, that launch of that movie, whatever that date is not going to be slip. There is no such thing as slip. So it's critical from an IT perspective that you realize you're working with these fixed deadlines. Responsiveness. Marketers change their minds all the time. It's like our prerogative to change our minds. We're used to that. We're used to cycles with our agencies, cycles with our designers. If we don't like it, we change it, and we change it again, and we change it again. And so you're going to need to think about how do you operate in that agile environment, that super agile environment, and serve those needs. Reliability. We don't really like to talk about it. We kind of just want to wave our hands and have like, ooh, we have this really cool campaign. We're going to spend all this money. We're going to drive all these people to Twitter. But in the end, we don't want the disaster. So you have to remind us of that. Hey, that campaign is going to be great. If it blows up in your face, you wasted all that money. Let's make sure this thing stays up and running. And then lastly, cost effective. And the important thing to know here is that marketers are used to spending money, but they're used to kind of knowing how much they're going to spend. So the variable cost model of the cloud is a little bit challenging for us. So there's nothing that any marketer hates worse than the CFO coming to you like you went over budget. So at RightScale, I have a very big budget. My team is all adept at managing parts of that budget. Nobody likes to go over budget and have a surprise. Occasionally, something may be higher than what we estimated, and we need to go back and say, hey, can we take that money elsewhere? Great. But we don't like to have big, huge surprises come back in our face. So this is something we'll talk about because with the variable cost model of the cloud, it becomes challenging. The other thing to keep in mind is agencies. Often agencies are involved in these technologies, these applications. And when a marketer buys from an agency, it's typically a fixed price for the project. You know in advance usually how much you're going to pay. You've allocated, I'm spending this much with my agency, I'm spending this much on my media, I'm spending this much on my technology. Add it all together, there's my budget. So with the agency, if you're working through an agency, they don't want to go over budget either. They don't want to look like the jerk to the CMO that has to come back and say, hey, we're now over budget. So this is a little bit of a different setting of expectations to both the marketer and the agencies about that variable cost model and what does it mean. So if you look at the green characteristics of the cloud, I think that it's a very good fit for most of these things that the marketer wants, right? Because we have elasticity, we have instant on, we can get high performance, we can be global around the whole world, redundancy, and the pay-per-use is nice from the low cost effect, meaning if we don't use it, we don't spend for it. It can be a negative with the variability. So let's just talk a little bit about some of the characteristics of RightScale, and we'll go into these in a little bit more detail, but the green boxes are some of the features that sort of will help us deliver on those needs of that marketer. So the pre-built technology stacks, our server templates, that gets you up and running really quickly. Monitoring, that helps you with reliability. auto-scaling with that scalability. So we have a lot of those aspects in the platform that serve those needs of the marketer. So we like to use the term, the technology behind the great ideas. Because marketers, in the end, if you start talking to them about cloud and cloud management or things like that, they're going to be probably just, losing interest really, really quickly. And so we need to talk to them about what they're trying to get with their campaign and how we can help them do that. The other thing I wanted to mention is just the fast cycle time. So because marketers want good ideas and they're going to iterate on those ideas, they need the ability to make changes as they go. And so that iteration and agility is important. So let's just talk about some of the campaigns and the companies that we've worked with at RightScale. So these are just a selection, and I'm going to talk about a few of these in more detail. So it ranges from launches, like movie launches and promos. We'll talk about the game we did for Condé Nast. American Girl has kind of a virtual world that they're working with. Mars did a giveaway campaign, so it was a time-limited campaign. So we'll dive into a few of these specific examples. So there's really two types of marketing. One is really those time-limited campaigns. The launch, the holiday, the special promotion that's going to start and stop, and it will tend to have a pretty fixed and definitive stop and end date. So one of the things that we like to talk about is what we've done with Lady Gaga. I don't know that Lady Gaga actually knows who RightScale is, but we call it, there's small scale, there's big scale, and there's Gaga scale. And so we've now done several different campaigns and activities with Lady Gaga. The left and the right ones were both promotional, so they were time limited. The middle one, the littlemonsters.com, which is a social site, that's sort of an ongoing campaign. So one of the most recent ones was with Coty. So they're the perfume people. So they have a Lady Gaga perfume. And they did a launch recently on the Lady Gaga perfume. So they were going to have a big, huge hit. And so we did a campaign with them. So in this case, it was a Facebook app. They were actually going to go through a hosting provider. It was hosting.com, who they'd used in the past. The agency had used them in the past to do campaigns. And when they started talking to Lady Gaga and Coty, they realized that the hosting.com is like, we can't accommodate you. We can't scale to what you're expecting to get out of this campaign. So they actually ended up sending them our way. And so that's how we ended up working on this campaign. So the good news is that they were up and running with this campaign within 14 days. Often, marketers and agencies don't really think ahead about the technology. It's like they're thinking about the creative and the idea and the brand, and then they come in at the last minute and be like, oh my God, and yes, this needs to run and it needs to scale, and everybody's like scrambling to make it happen. So this is where cloud is great, right? Because we can get up and running sort of instantly. We can provision servers. We don't have to order them, and we're good to go. So this was about a 14-day process, and then we smoothly scaled them up and down to meet their load. And we're now talking with Coty about doing some other projects with them as well. Another example, this was a similar one. This was a campaign with Mars, M&M's. This was a couple years back, actually a little bit before my time. But it was an interesting story. They were going to do this promotion where every Friday they were going to give away chocolate. And they did this campaign, and they were running it on like all the servers in their office. Like they networked all the servers together and sort of tried to make this weird cluster, or I heard the term yesterday, Franken-cloud, it wasn't really a cloud. Well, unfortunately, they had a very successful campaign and experienced the success disaster, which not only people couldn't actually get to the site, but it brought their entire office to a halt because it sucked up everything on every single server and machine that was running in their office until they couldn't do anything. So this was a horrible problem, and it actually could only handle like 1/10 of the traffic of the people that were trying to get the free chocolate. So this was one of those emergency things. It failed on Friday. They were doing this weekly, like for a summer. And so they came to us, and it's like, by next Friday, we need to fix this because we can't have this happen again. So we got them up and running on AWS in an even shorter time frame. This was like a less than 7-day window, again, smoothly scaling them to meet the load. The other really interesting piece of that is their marketing people were really liking the monitoring aspect. Because they had a bunch of media spend, like radio, TV ads, and they could watch in real time when those ads were playing, and they could see the traffic and the spikes that were coming out of those ads. So it was almost like a super real-time Google Analytics kind of thing to let them see how their ad spend was actually playing out. So those are a couple of those time-limited campaigns, but we also have ongoing projects. So these are things we're doing in marketing, apps, sites, whatever, that are going to stay for an indefinite period of time. And so we've also worked on a few of those as well. So one of the interesting ones was with American Girl. So they're a division of Mattel, and they do the dolls. You guys know, like the little, Abby, whatever, all these historical dolls with names. And they sell to kind of that tween and younger age. And so a couple of years back, they had decided that they were going to do a virtual world for the dolls. So you get the doll, you go online, you put in your code, you have an avatar, and you have your little virtual world. So they had built this, and originally their plan was to do it on their own data center, kind of in-house, and then over time to move it to AWS. But they thought they could get away with their own data center right from the beginning. Well, they put the thing up, and the performance was horrible. And one of the reasons was the application was sort of not very well built and architected. I mean, it wasn't thought about making it highly performant. This is also very common in the marketing world because you get these digital interactive agencies. Sometimes they're subcontracting to these development shops, and the quality may vary. There's some of them that are super awesome, and there's some of them that really are not super awesome. And also, they're not thinking about performance. They're just thinking about, how do I meet the needs of the client? How do I make this cool? How do I make it look good? How do I add these features? So they got the thing up and running, but it was like really, really slow, and so the customer experience wasn't very good. And at first they just had a few users on it, but they had a big holiday catalog going out. I think this was like October, late October timeframe when everybody's prepping for the holidays. And so they were going to do this catalog drop that was going to go out, and they were afraid it was going to create a flood, and they were going to get all these people with this really bad experience on their virtual world. So again, came to us, another emergency. You can get a theme going here of how marketing operates sometimes. And it was, again, a 14-day process. So they were able to, smoothly scale up to meet the load, create kind of a stable system. Once they got it up and running, they don't have huge spikes in traffic now on an ongoing basis. But at the beginning, they were dealing with that initial growth phase. And so they've also been able to reduce the costs from what it would have been just running it in the data center. And the time that they have to spend, like they don't need to spend a lot of sysadmin time to get the thing up and running. They can just focus on, keeping that running. They could have gone back and rebuilt their application, but in the end, it was really cheaper for them to kind of throw more hardware at it and use the cloud to allow that to scale up. So they're now running that on an ongoing basis. A last example is Intercontinental Hotel Group. So this is the Intercontinental Hotels, and they own several other brands. They were doing a website for Chinese reservation system, and that, again, has huge scalability. As you can imagine, like holidays, Chinese New Year's, like everybody's making hotel reservations, so they definitely have that cyclical traffic that happens year after year. And also, they needed geographic reach into multiple different areas, and so they needed to be able to run in multiple different locations. Again, RightScale, scale up. But the other thing that they really liked is sort of the configuration that they could use a server template to have a dev, test, staging, production systems and make sure that they're all consistent. So as you're going through the software development lifecycle, you don't have a bunch of issues that come up that, everything worked fine in dev, but as soon as we put it in test or move it into staging and start scaling it, everything starts to fall apart. And then this is actually the last one, Sony Music. So Sony does websites for their artists. So each artist has an individual website, and they also have an e-commerce system that goes with that. And as you can imagine, like different artists are going to have different scale. So this isn't something where it's like multi-tenanted, all the artists together. It's something where they've got replicated artist 1, artist 2, artist 3, artist 4, and each of those can scale as needed. So, Michael Jackson dies and, Michael Jackson goes through the roof. Sorry, Michael Jackson. That was kind of a bad example, negative example. Or, some other big hit or some other big news, somebody might go through the roof, whereas others might bump along at a little bit lower traffic. So the other thing is because it was e-commerce, they needed PCI compliance. So they needed to make sure it met all the e-commerce rules because they're having cardholder data in it. So with them, it was really a replication issue. They needed to be able to create, here's kind of our standard technology stack and template and application for each website. Obviously, the templates and the content are going to change, but I want to be able to sort of replicate this exactly for each of my artists, but each one can then scale up and down for the needs of that particular artist. I can have different content, but if I need to, patch and have an updated version across all of my artists, I have a way to do that. I can update my server template, and then I can start to roll those things out. So for them, scalability was important, but also that consistent configuration across the artists. So let's just talk a little bit about RightScale and how RightScale helps with this. So I think if you think about how the marketer's looking at this, okay, I want a good consumer experience, my customers or users or whatever I call them, depending on my buyers, depending on what industry I'm in. I can spend my time on design. I can spend my time to make sure it's performant, it's reliable. All of that aspect of consumer experience, the technology can help them to enable that. Second, speed to market. Get things up and running quickly. Meet my marketing deadlines. Don't spend all my time on infrastructure so all my technical people can spend time on the application or making the site better or providing new features, the stuff that I really care about. The cost model. So assuming we can deal with the variability, we'll talk about that in a minute. Flexibility. I can revise. I can make changes. I don't have to wait. And reusability. This is something that not everybody thinks about. We talked about the Sony example, reuse across artists, but also reuse from campaign to campaign to campaign. If you're an agency and you have your standard technology stack, or you're a company and you have your standard way you do these websites, you can repeat and replicate that time after time after time. So with RightScale, you guys probably know about, if you have been working with RightScale at all or thinking about RightScale, about our concept of server templates. So server template is just what it sounds like. It's like a template for a piece of your technology stack or a section of your technology stack, and you can have multiple of those to make up your whole application. The other thing you can do is you can leverage our API that some of our customers have done to create something we call the IT vending machine or self-service vending machine. So this could be really helpful if you're in an agency or you're in a company and you have that standard web stack that you use for your websites or your games or your apps or whatever it might be, and you can now take that and embed that into a web page and allow it to have push-button service. So in an agency, that might look like I've got my 3 or 4 standard stacks. Maybe some of it's like a Drupal or a WordPress site. Some of it might be a LAMP stack. Some of it might be something more complicated. My individual account teams can go push-button the one they want. It's now replicated following all of my standards. So this is something, we had a session on this yesterday. If you didn't attend it, you can also watch it on the video afterwards. We've also provided some sample code for creating on GitHub for creating one of these vending machines, and then obviously you would tailor it to your specific needs. Auto scaling up and down. This is another important piece, is we need to scale up, but we need to scale down so we're not paying when we're using it. So you can scale up and down based on any metrics that you want. But the most common one is percent of CPU usage. So meaning when my CPUs start to get too full, I want to start to scale up and scale down. And let me just show you a picture of what that looks like in the product. So if you look here, you can do things like setting a min and max. I want a minimum of 5 servers and a max of 100 servers. Or maybe you don't even want a max. But you can also set time thresholds for that. So let's say you know that weekends are big, or starting on Thursday night, or evenings, or daytime. You can automatically pre-provision, not waiting for the usage to come, but ahead of some known usage. So you could move your min from 5 of something in the evening, or at night, overnight, let's say, when it's low, and then before the morning, if your traffic goes up, then you could say, my min now during the day is going to be 10. Or once I hit the holiday season, my min's going to go up. Or before my drop of my catalog. So that's you can make a scheduled change in those mins and maxes. The other thing you can do is you can set thresholds for things like CPU utilization, but we can do it a lot smarter than just a threshold. So let's think of a situation where we have, 10 web servers running. We want to maybe once we hit 85% utilization, we want to go ahead and scale up and add more web servers. Well, the problem is that 1 or 2 web servers that are either overtaxed for some reason or underutilized for some reason can throw the average off. So we don't use a pure average. Instead, we use a voting mechanism. So let's take those 10 web servers. Each one gets a vote. Have I hit my 85% threshold? Yes or no? And then you can determine at what percent vote will you go ahead and scale up. So for example, once 60% of my machines are at 85% threshold, then we're going to go ahead and scale up. So you can tweak and tune all of those parameters as you choose. Exact same thing on scale down. So once I get below a certain threshold on average, we're going to go ahead and scale down. The other thing is to really avoid bouncing around. So meaning you scale up and you immediately get some weird changes as the load starts to balance across the servers, and you get these weird bounce backs where you start scaling up, scaling down. So you can also put in a calm down time that says, okay, once you've done this, wait 20 minutes or whatever it's going to take for all that to get up and running properly before you make any further decisions to scale further up and down. So you have a lot of really interesting tuning handles that make it easier for you to really tailor this and make sure that it's going to be a smooth experience for all the consumers. The other part we talked about is cloud spend and sort of the complexity and variability of that for your marketers, for your agencies, for them to understand and plan for, especially if they haven't been using cloud a lot. And so part of this is going to be education, talking to them about what that might look like. And then the other part is really doing a better job of forecasting and helping them understand under different scenarios, what could that cost be. And so Plan for Cloud is a free tool that we provide. There's a website, www.planforcloud.com. It's nice because if you're a RightScale user, you can import your RightScale deployments if you have existing deployments already. If you're an Amazon user, you can import Amazon deployments if you have those already. If you have nothing yet, if you're thinking about a future application, you can just start from scratch and plan out what you think you need. And so with Plan for Cloud, you can set a whole bunch of parameters about which clouds, which types of servers, what databases, what storage, which bandwidth. You pick and choose all of the various options that impact your costs. And then out of that, it does a cost report for you that tells you what your total cost will look like across those. In this case, it's a 3-year, so this would be a scenario, for example, for an ongoing campaign. If it was time limited, you'd see a shorter period of time. You can also apply patterns to this. So patterns, think of them as growth patterns, seasonality patterns, declines in usage, anything, the catalog drop, all of those patterns can be built in so that you can see how that will impact your usage, hence the servers allocated, hence the costs associated with it. The other nice thing is it'll show you what those costs come from, what components of the cloud usage, so whether it's compute or storage or network or bandwidth, so you can look at ways to optimize. And then most importantly is you want to look at different scenarios to say, all right, let's assume kind of our best case middle line for the campaign. What does that look like? Let's assume, like worst case scenario. Let's assume like crazy successful scenario. So even if you can't turn this into a fixed cost, you can at least give your marketers sort of a bandwidth to say, look, crazy successful looks like X, middle of the line looks like Y, not great looks like Z. So now they at least have a band in which they can think about putting their budget together and start to get a handle around the variable part of the cost. Reuse of reference architecture. So if this is something that you're dealing with where you may do this again and again and again, or your client, for different clients if you're on the agency side, when you create and set up these server templates and deployments, all of this is things you could reuse from campaign to campaign, project to project, customer to customer. And then the last thing is just RightScale can also help on the services side. So we're now offering some new services packages that are specifically oriented for people that are doing campaigns and marketing efforts, whether time limited or ongoing. And the goal here is to really help you through the whole process from the plan phase, through development, through launch, and monitoring. And it helps set this up for you so you can do this in either a do-it-yourself mode, like I want to do it, I just want your help and advice, or you can do it what we call white glove, which is what I'm showing here, that says, look, just do this for me, or do it for my marketing team, or do it for the agency, because they don't really have that much expertise, and we'd rather just have somebody that's experts do it for me. So in this case, we can actually set up the server templates, set up the deployments, the environments for dev, test, staging, production, set up the auto-scaling rules, set up all the monitoring capabilities. And we also offer support with this. So we offer a 24/7 support as a default, but we also offer during a campaign launch period, a 72-hour window, where we're really being proactive support, meaning we can actually take alerts that are coming off the system and make sure that system is staying up. So let's say you've got the big launch, you're putting it up, you want to make sure that 72 hours that everything's tuned and tweaked till everything gets running stably. We can do that for you. And also monitoring. So for the first couple weeks, we'll be checking monitoring statistics and reporting back to you on what's happening, so you know how it's all looking, that it's all working properly, and then we can also use that information to tweak and tune. So if you're doing something like this and you are not a do-it-yourselfer, but you want sort of the extra help, these are options that we have, and feel free to talk to any of our account or sales team to talk about how that might work in your particular situation. So with that, I thought we would wrap it up. I think that's plenty of slides. If we have any questions, we can take those. No? Okay, good. In that case, we can all go home early. Thank you guys very much for attending. We will have all the videos and recordings available on the website shortly, if not soon. And so if you want to check it out or pass it on to a colleague, feel free to do that. And have a great rest of your day and rest of your weekend.